Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Empowering Musicians podcast. I'm your host and founder of Empowering Musicians, Michael Manley. And today we're talking about safeguarding our artist self and what I'm calling the practice of practice. So what do I mean by the practice of practice? So practice can mean many things. It can be, in our sense, a repeated exercise for proficiency, a repeated habit of doing something to get better, or it can mean the continuous exercise of a profession, right? So a doctor's practice, a medical practice, etc. This week's episode was really encountered earlier this week, and it involved me teaching in a school, being in a room that I wasn't that familiar with. And normally, I've traveled with my horn all over the country performing, and we often will set our instruments down on a chair while we're resting, while we're doing something else. So I was in the school, I was in a new room, and there was a chair, and it was kind of a weirdly molded chair, almost like a mid-century, like tulip style chair in terms of the seat, right? It had four legs, but it had this weird contour. So I put my horn down on the chair and, left the room for like 10 minutes. And for those of you who don't know, this is what my instrument looks like. It dates from 1991. It was made by a horn maker named Walter Lawson, who is no longer living, sadly. And it's literally not really replaceable. I could possibly find another Lawson horn for sale, but I couldn't easily replace this horn. So I put this horn down on this molded chair, and literally 10 minutes went by, and I came back into the room. And as I'm walking into the room, the forces of the universe aligned in such a way that my horn just slowly slid off the lip of the chair onto tile floor. So many things were going through my head in this moment, right? Like shock and horror, and then a feeling of what's going to happen. It's like it happened in slow motion, right? Luckily, the bell was damaged. The mouthpiece, my new mouthpiece was damaged. I have a great new mouthpiece, by the way, made by Jan Balu, who's out there in Chicago, excuse me, making some great horns and mouthpieces. And just got this mouthpiece maybe a month and a half ago, and love it. So the mouthpiece shank was damaged, and I had to get that repaired. And the bell was just bent slightly on the edge, but miraculously nothing worse happened. And thankfully, we have a wonderful trumpet maker in Las Vegas named Mike Del Quadro, who kindly agreed to repair my horn on short notice, even though he doesn't really do a lot of repair work now. So I was able to get everything fixed, and everything was fine. But again, in that moment, I'm thinking, all these feelings are going through my head of neglect, of being irresponsible, and not really protecting my instrument in the way that I should have. And it caused me to really think about, if I'm doing the same, how am I protecting my music making? How am I protecting my artist self, right? And am I neglecting that part of myself as much as in this moment I was neglecting my instrument? And also, how am I practicing? That is the first definition of repeating work for proficiency, to build my practice, right? My sense of my career as an artist, or my practice of being a musician. So I was reflecting on this occasion again by this horrible accident I had with my horn. And one of the things that I was coming up on is the idea of practicing an instrument, like writing or working out or learning any sport or other discipline, has to be a good habit that we build. And I was thinking about this in my own life, and it's like, am I really making a habit of my horn playing? And what is a habit really? It's not really the length of time. It's not about length of time, right? It's not 3 hours. It's not 4 hours. It's not 20 minutes. It's whatever length of time that we can devote but what's important is frequency and regularity, right? So a habit is frequent and regular. So we have to do something every day. If you're a writer, if you're a painter, if you're studying to master a sport, you have to do something every day. And it does matter at some level. You can't do 1 minute of it, but if you only do 20 minutes a day, it's better than doing 1 hour every 2 weeks, right? We have to do something every day to really build it into a habit. And for me, I have a 20-minute warm-up, excuse me, that I can do. And it is derived from the Caruso method, and Caruso was a teacher in New York City who worked with a lot of brass players. And what I like about it is that I can do it, and it's very defined. I can do it any day, regardless of how I feel, and know that I'm at least putting in that time on those exercises. They're very sort of technical and physical, and they're not really about music making as much as building the tools that we need. So it's a lot like working out in a way. And I just know that like there's no excuse for me not to do that 20-minute workout that I do. And we have to really protect and defend the time for these habits. It's really easy to say, you know what, I woke up too late this morning, so I can't go on that run, or I can't write those 3 pages of diary that I know help me get centered, or I can't practice for those 20 minutes. So habit is something we really have to protect and defend the time for. And I was thinking about how inspiration is really the enemy of habit, right? And what do I mean by that? We don't really wait for inspiration to practice. We have to practice in order to be inspired, right? And the inspiration bus never comes, right? If we're looking for waiting around to be inspired to create, or to practice, or to work out, or to paint, it's never going to happen, right? And one of my favorite stories about this regards the writer E.L. Doctorow. And so E.L. Doctorow wrote, and I think like a lot of writers, probably writes every day, doesn't wait for inspiration. And he was in his writing room, which was intentionally a bare room, right, with a desk. And he couldn't think of anything to write, was staring at a white wall. And he started writing about the wall. And he started thinking about the history of the wall. And that little bit of practice, of inspiration, of just writing about the wall, led him to this whole novel called Ragtime, which was an amazing novel, won the Pulitzer Prize, etc. So we don't wait to be inspired. We practice so that inspiration will come, right? And it's really funny to me how prolific some people are, because I'm not that prolific, right? I've written, but I don't make writing a practice right now in my life, and I really need to. But my writing is very limited in my output. But prolific artists can make great works because they're practicing their discipline all the time. So if I think of somebody like Stephen King or John Williams, who just write an incredible amount of output, the amount of work that they've achieved is kind of staggering. And they make these great works because they're practicing their discipline all the time. And I will say that I think also feeling is the enemy of habit. And what do I mean by that, right? It's like inspiration. It's like sometimes I just don't feel, I don't feel right. My lips feel terrible. I start to make a sound. I really hate what it sounds like. I just don't feel great that day. Working out for me is very similar. I just often feel like I don't have the energy, but again, it's about building this practice, and we can't wait till we feel like doing it. So our feelings about our work result from the habit. I know in my own life, there was a time when I was taking some boxing lessons, and I was doing it not to really learn how to be a great fighter, but it was more as an exercise. It was a vehicle to burn fat and calories and just really get my blood going and get my cardio happening. And I really enjoyed it. And I had I took some private teachings with a teacher in New York, a boxing coach, and especially over COVID when he had lost his job and needed some income, and I was fortunately, working all through COVID. So we would have he would come up to my neighborhood and we would do boxing in the park during COVID, right? Because you couldn't you had to be masked and outdoors and all that stuff. And there were days when I just thought to myself, oh my God, this is going to kill. It's literally going to kill me. Like, because we would start with doing jumping jacks, high knee running in place, burpees or push-ups or whatever, and then do boxing for the last 30 minutes. And I just thought to myself, some days I was like, this is going to kill me. I just can't, I don't see how I can do this today. I just feel like really tired. I feel run down, whatever. But then you get into it and you start doing it and you're like, I'm really glad I did that because I feel so much better, right? And the same as I think with any discipline. We may not feel like doing it at first, but because we want to protect this habit, we really have to do it regardless of how we feel about it. And then once we have this habit, regardless of how we feel when we start, we do end up developing positive feelings, right? Of joy, of gratitude, accomplishment, vulnerability, in terms of serving others through whatever the art form is we're practicing, if we're practicing an art form. But for me, like with the boxing, it was more about, wow, I just feel so much better. Like I have so much energy now that I did that, even though an hour ago, I didn't think I could make it through minute 5, right? But I did it, and now I feel much better. So again, the feelings come out of the habit. We don't do the habit because we feel like doing it. And the habit is what leads to something called flow. And there's a great book that I'm reading called The Art of the Impossible right now. My good friend, Jacqueline Leclerc, turned me onto this book, and we're kind of like virtually reading it on our own together. And we're going to have a virtual book club in March to discuss how it's been for us. But it's a great book, and the guy who wrote it is really trying to break down what are the components of exponential growth, right? Somebody who can run a mile under 4 minutes, right? Or people that achieve just what seems like impossible physical feats, or other areas of accomplishment. Like what is the formula for that? And one of the things he talks about is being in the flow state. And so we can't get into the flow state until we build this habit, I'm convinced. And what is flow? Flow is that state where we lose a sense of time. We are just so focused and absorbed with that activity. And it's creating this inner kind of like fire and joy in us. And it's this magic spot because we really are getting out of our headspace and into our heart space. And we're enjoying the process and we're not focused on the outcome. That's really key. And we're doing versus trying. So the ego tries and the spirit does. I like to really think about it in that term. Like if we can get out of our own way, we start to just live in the moment in a way that brings us a lot of joy and sense of accomplishment. And again, we may even lose a sense of time because we're just so focused on what we do. And this flow is really the incubator of exponential growth in a technical, or I would say creative progress, right? So when I've had success with my personal writing, it's because I was doing it every day and I was really absorbed in it. And I really was in the zone or the flow, right? And somebody asked about the name of this book. I believe it's called The Art of the Impossible. And I don't recall the author's name, but he does have a website as well. So if you Google The Art of the Impossible, I believe that will come up. And Kotler, I believe his name is, but let me just check real quick while I'm here. And I found that I've been in that flow state a few times in my life, and every time I've just felt again this sense of like joy and accomplishment and satisfaction. And it doesn't have to do with the outcome, right? We can have performances where we just get lost in the performance, and we may not even like remember how technically correct we were, because we just were making music in such a way that it was sweeping us away, right? So that's what we want to find. And it's hard sometimes because we think about something like taking an audition or performing a difficult piece in public, and you think, how am I gonna get into that state where I'm not thinking about the dread or the nerves of, oh my gosh, what if this goes wrong, or what? In order to get out of that headspace, we have to get into this flow state, and the only way to do that is really through habit, I believe. So the book is called The Art of the Impossible, a Peak Performance Primer, and it's by Stephen Kotler, Kotler. And I know that he's written some other books, and there is another whole book on flow. But it reminds me that, again, we have to do what we do because we love it, right? But there's sometimes when we just don't feel like it, or we may not be inspired. But my advice to you is, again, find a way to build a habit. And for me, with exercise and with performance, I make it 30 minutes or less. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to do more that day, but it means that I have no excuse, right? So if I have a gym routine that takes 90 minutes, and I say, oh my gosh, you know what? Today's a really busy day and I woke up late. I don't have 90 minutes to get to the gym. It's really easy to get out of the habit. But if the workout is 25 minutes, it's hard to say, oh, you know what? I don't have 25 minutes to devote to my health today. The same for me, excuse me, is with my horn playing. Like, I know that I can get 20 minutes in every day. Like, maybe I'm not going to get to that list of excerpts that I'm preparing for an audition, or I'm not going to get to look at that piece that I have to play in 3 weeks today. Maybe I'm gonna not make as much progress in that learning realm. But I know that every day I can do this 20 minutes, right? This 20-minute routine that is just, I can do the same thing every day for 20 minutes. It's gonna keep all of my physical chops up, and it's gonna keep my breathing and every other component of my playing in shape. And I don't have an excuse not to do it if it's only 20 minutes. So protect your good habits and don't wait for inspiration. Practice your habit to be inspired. And this state of flow is really achieved through habit. And this habit is key regardless of how much or little time we have. I'm reflecting on the fact that I don't have a habit of writing right now, right? So my writing is something that I'm feeling a little bit disconnected from. And writing for me is the harder habit, right? With music or with athletics, it's easy to say, I just need to pick up this weight and do this. I need to just play these long tones today. With writing, again, it's that EL doctor staring at the wall, the blank page. But I'm convinced that even with writing, I can build a habit where I start to get my creative juices flowing. And I'm convinced that my writing will take off once I build that back. But all of this, regardless of your discipline, is really about safeguarding and protecting that inner artist, or that inner athlete, or that inner writer, whatever it is that you want to study. And do not put your French horn down on a molded plastic chair with a beveled lip. I learned that lesson the hard way this week. So with that, I will leave you all and look forward to seeing you next week. And take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye.